So we've discussed how Shakespeare's work was revolutionary in its subject matter, its character development, but there are a few technical elements of his writing that we should become familiar with. Now, it's not to say that Shakespeare invented these literary forms or devices, but it's safe to say that he perfected them. They are factors in his writing that have become synonymous with him and his work. First up, let's take a closer look at a term we've heard several times before, but up till now we have not gone into any greater detail on, and that, of course, is the soliloquy. The soliloquy is probably the literary device that is most associated with Shakespeare. It is the one that he made the most famous. When we talk about soliloquies, you generally think Shakespeare's work. The soliloquy has been a part of playwriting almost since the beginning. In fact, if you remember, when we were discussing the neoclassics and they were outlining their rules for theater, one of those rules was the banning of the soliloquy because it wasn't true to life. So while it has been part of plays and theatrical endeavors from the start, we've saved talking about it till now because Shakespeare was the playwright who really put it on the map. So what is a soliloquy? A soliloquy is, quite simply, when an actor is alone on stage and is reciting a long speech directly to the audience. Now, this is not a character having an interaction with the audience. They aren't asking them something and having the audience respond. It's not an interactive conversation, but rather it is when the character is talking through their own thoughts, their own feelings, where they are emotionally in the story, trying to sort things out for themselves, having what we would normally consider to be the internal monologue, only reciting it out loud. There are hundreds of soliloquies in Shakespeare's work, probably the most famous being Hamlet's to be or not to be speech. Okay, so I want to interject here for just a second because I really want to make sure that we understand the difference between a traditional monologue and a soliloquy. Now, a monologue, as most people know, is when an actor has a long, interrupted block of dialogue. This is the thing that you are usually called upon to perform for an audition. But the difference between a monologue and a soliloquy is that when an actor is performing a monologue, traditionally there is another actor, at least one other actor, on stage with them, and they are delivering the monologue directly to this other character. They are talking to them, and the other character is reacting, sometimes throwing in a lead-in line, something that's going to spur the monologue further on. Whereas with a soliloquy, an actor is on stage by themselves. There is no one else that they are interacting with. And they are having a discussion basically with themselves. They're talking to themselves. And as someone who talks to himself rather a lot, this is something I can understand. I don't know how many people out there talk to themselves, but this is something that is not as outrageous as it sounds. So think of it in these terms. If I was giving a monologue right now, and I had another actor on stage with me, I'd be talking directly to them. I'd be saying, "It was you. I remember the day that I was skipping along through the fields with my beloved collie Rex, and you came along in your truck and you ran him over and you laughed, and I've spent all my years and I will get revenge on you, sir, and I have you here now and I shall have my revenge." So that is a monologue. I'm talking to the person. Soliloquy, by contrast, is when I would be on stage by myself, as I actually am, and would be pondering the situation, going, as example, he is there. I know he's there. He's the one who killed my beloved collie Rex all those years ago. I shall have my revenge. I shall kill him, but is it right? Is it right to kill him? Does blood truly require blood? Yes, it does. Of course it does. For he must be made to pay. But was Rex really that good of a dog? Really, he wasn't housebroken. He bit me several times. It doesn't matter. He was your dog and revenge must be taken. You see how I'm doing it there? I'm having kind of the conversation with myself. So that is the primary difference between monologue and soliloquy. The next element that you should be made aware of is a little bit more complicated, and that is the literary writing device known as iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter refers to the style and the rhythm Shakespeare wrote his plays and sonnets in. Now, anyone who has ever looked at any piece of writing from any Elizabethan playwright knows that they wrote their lines in verse, meaning they wrote it out like a poem. This is a tradition going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. If you remember listening to some of the dialogue from Oedipus or reading some of the scripts from Sophocles, they're written in verse. The biggest difference between the Greeks and the Elizabethans is, believe it or not, the Elizabethans were writing in a much more colloquial, friendly style. They were writing their dialogue to be understood by the greater public. They wanted their plays to reach the widest possible audience. So as complicated as we may find the writing now, believe it or not, it was originally written to be as simplistic as possible. So iambic pentameter is the term we use for the specific style of verse that Shakespeare himself wrote in. Other playwrights used iambic pentameter as well, but this we kind of credit specifically to him. There is a lot you can get into as it relates to iambic pentameter. There are a lot of variations, exceptions, examples of him breaking it. But as we are looking at this solely from an introductory point of view, just to kind of give you the basic idea, let's keep it simple for now. In its basic form, iambic pentameter is a measure of an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable, so that the rhythm can be easily written down as kind of a da-dum. So if you're playing a drum, it'd be kind of a... The unstressed followed by the stressed syllable, or the da-dum method of writing, is meant to simulate the human heartbeat. So if you put your hand on your heart and you kind of feel the pumping and you feel that ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. So that's what the iambic pentameter is attempting to emulate. A standard line of iambic pentameter is 5 unstressed syllables and 5 stressed syllables per row. So that is in a perfect example of iambic pentameter. You have 5 unstressed syllables followed by 5 stressed syllables. Let's take a look at a brief example. So here we have Shakespeare's sonnet number 75, and we see that someone has already broken it down into the iambic pentameter. So the line itself: one day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains his prey. So if we look, and you can see the way it's broken down, you can see the unstressed syllable there indicated by the U, and the stressed syllable indicated by the dash. So you can see this one breaks down fairly easily, and you can play it out with the beat. One day I wrote her name upon the strand, but came the waves and washed it away. Again I wrote it with a second hand, but came the tide and made my pains his prey. So you can see the da-da, 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 da-da. Now that is a perfect example of iambic pentameter. However, as stated, and we don't want to get too deep into this, at this stage anyway, Shakespeare rarely wrote in perfect iambic pentameter. That was kind of his baseline that he would go back to, but he would vary it up throughout the show. Let's take a look at another example. Let's look at a soliloquy from one of Shakespeare's plays. This is the dagger speech from Macbeth. And as we kind of look at this example, we won't go through all of them, but you can kind of go back and freeze this and look at it at your leisure. You can see that there are many ways in which Shakespeare's writing actually broke with classic iambic pentameter. You take a look at the very first line, is this a dagger which I see before me? And as we break it down, what you notice, there's an extra syllable at the end. So if we're doing the da-da test, is this a dagger which I see before me? Remember, in perfect iambic pentameter, the line is supposed to have 5 unstressed syllables followed by 5 stressed syllables. This one here has a extra unstressed syllable. Look at the next line. So here's another way he varies things up. The handle toward my hand, come let me clutch thee. So you see that there in the middle, there is a switch. You see that? Right at the my hand, come let me. So whereas again, it's supposed to go unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, and then another stressed. So he inverts it and switches it up mid-line. This is called totactic inversion, when he switches up the syllables from an unstressed to a stress. You can see the third line is kind of perfect iambic pentameter, 5 syllables each going there. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. So there are a lot of ways. This is just a couple examples. There are times when Shakespeare will also throw in what we call rhyming couplets, where, like a regular poem, they would rhyme and then go back to unrhyming. There are feminine endings to certain things. The point is that there are a lot of variations on the iambic pentameter. And in some of the videos that I'll be including with this video, they're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. But for solely introductory purposes, what you need to make sure that you are aware of is that iambic pentameter is the 5 unstressed and 5 stressed syllables coming together to make that heartbeat rhythm, that